everyone. So, as you guessed, I'm going to talk about email today. But first of all, introduce myself. At Worldline since 2006, and when I arrived, I was working on email. At the time, it was for Wanadu for the eldest of us. And been doing some run for various messaging platforms. I've been doing some expertise and technical supports for the same messaging platforms, mainly on securing on fighting abuse. I've been a team manager. I've been a head of production for a Regalian service for a while. I left the messaging platforms. I don't know what happened to me. It was a mistake. And then I came back and I'm doing abuse and operational security on messaging platforms and other various services mainly for e-education. I'm also a tech squad member, and I'm not a developer, sorry. So first of all, we'll talk about the genesis of the email. The email is almost as old as the internet, or the ARPANET, as this time it was called like that. The SMTP protocol and the ARPA text messages were conceived without any security consideration, like many other protocol at the beginning of the network, because the network was just a bunch of computers. Almost everyone knew everyone, and nobody had the idea to hack, because the hackers maybe didn't have any connection at this time. So at this time, there is no need to secure anything, neither the email or any other network application. And on the beginning, there was probably the first security on the email with the network filtering and IP restriction left to discretion of the relay admin. But even there, most of the mail relay was completely open. Anyone could use any relay to send an email to anyone, or at least anyone who had a mailbox. At this time, it was not a lot of people. Then the internet was like a Garden of Eden. It was completely free and a paradise for geeks. In 1996, there was the apple on the garden in the form of MIME. MIME is, in fact, what we call attachment in the email. It's a multi-part content email. And until 1996, the email was just composed of plain text. So there is no big evil you can do with plain text. Maybe some bad jokes, probably not a lot of things. But spam was before the MIME. It's almost as old as the email, because the first unsolicited commercial email, were roughly called the spam, was sent in 1978. It was an advertisement sent at 200 people for a computer seller. The reaction was rather negative. Everybody was annoyed to have received this mail, but so far it helped selling the product. So it was positive for the guy who sent the spam, but negative for those who received it, since it has not changed. And so a bit of culture, because it's very interesting to know the genesis of the word spam. So probably some of you knew that already. That precise sketch of the Monty Python is the origin of the word spam, because plenty of spam is just that what we don't want. And after the spam is the virus. The first virus was just a macro virus. It was a Word document with a macro in it. It has the particularity to spread itself, because when you open the macro, it went to your Outlook address book and sent to the 51st entries of the address book. It sent itself. So it's really the first way of a virus to spread. And so Melissa is the name of a topless dancer, and so that's why I thought it would have been interesting to have another cultural interlude. No, sorry, there is no cultural interlude. The second very known virus was in 2000. It was called I Love You. Maybe the eldest of you also remember the I Love You virus that made a lot of noise because it was just a simple mail with a VBS attachment It was derived from Melissa virus. It was an evolution, and it was not in a document. It was just an attachment FibBS, and Windows at this time didn't show the extension of the file, so it was very tempting to click on the file and to execute the VPS code. And this one was much more dangerous than Melissa because it attacked some parts of the hard drive and some objects of the computer. So this one just didn't only spread itself, but it also made some loss in the user's computer. Here I come back to the mail I got from the president of the world that you saw in the teaser. How is it possible? Here I sent a mail as it was the only possibility before 1996, before we started to have the SMTP extensions with authentication and so on. But even when I joined Worldline in 2006, in the platform we were administrating, this possibility was widely open. This means that we were working for an ISP, for an internet service provider, who were offering some SMTP relay to its customers, and anyone who had a box at this ISP had the possibility to use the relay of the ISP to send such an email. You see that the protocol exchange. So just say hello. I say mail from. You see mail from. I use the domain president of the world.org. I don't even know if the domain exists, but there is nothing to check on the authorization I have or the legitimacy I have to use the domain, the recipient address. So it's okay, my address. And here you see after the data block, there is the headers. Okay, subject, there's no point to control it. But the from header, which is the one you see here that is displayed, in the from header, I said, I can write whatever I want. And here as well, nothing is written on it. Nothing is checked on it. And it may not even be the same than the one here. Here, mail from is the one that receives the DSN if the mail is bounced, meaning if I send a mail to a mailbox that is over quota or to a mailbox that doesn't exist, that we receive a DSN, delivery status notification, and that address receives the DSN. And that address is the one that will receive the mail if I say reply to, and that is the one also that is shown here. And okay, for the text, here is just plain text, but of course I could add any attachment, virus, why not, or whatever. Of course, here you can see the mail is sent. I received the mail. And of course, there can be some anti-spam filters for some antivirus filters. This means some things that filter the content, but there is absolutely no filter regarding the protocol. At least the content of the protocol are information, and of course no content, no verification regarding the legitimacy I have to use the domain name or even the email address. So I did this one in internal Worldline relay, so I cheated a bit because now no ISP would allow to send such an email, of course. So if I summarize, there is no normalized way to control the return path, no normalized way to control the from header, and all is in clear text. You saw I just used NC to send the email, not even OpenSSL to open a TLS socket or whatever. There is no TLS negotiation, and there is no encryption, and no integrity control. In other words, email policy control is like that. Something like in the jungle you have to fight with your own hands, and maybe a knife if you're lucky. So some years later, or in fact not that later because it was normalized in 1996, but PGP on a SMIME has never been really adopted. So PGP and SMIME are some tools probably very well known, mainly SMIME, that are used to encrypt or to sign some messaging based on asymmetric cryptography. Somehow, two of them have the same purpose, but not really the same philosophy. Because for PGP, the process key validation is based on personal keyring, and I put on my keyring the keys of people I personally know, or the people that have been somehow recommended by some people I know. The idea is that the friends of my friends are my friends. When SMIME is based on X509, which is a hierarchical validation. I trust an authority, and I trust everything that is trusted by his authority, and I even trust the thing that is trusted by the authority, trusted by itself an authority on as many levels as you want. So it's the idea of X509. But this PGP and SMIME are a really poor adoption rate, and even today they are just used in some professional context, not even widely. So regarding the connection privacy, there is a TLS adoption that was made difficult by the fact that email pre-existed before some people decided that the flow should be encrypted. And when the email went from a relay to another relay, there was no way to guess if the next relay was going to accept the TLS negotiation. So there is no way you could open the socket, start the TLS negotiation, and then start the SMTP negotiation. So it went the other side. Mean you open the socket, you start the SMTP negotiation, and in the extended SMTP negotiation, the relay can say you start TLS, which means, okay, now that you have opened the SMTP channel, we can start TLS because I will accept it. And then you start the TLS negotiation. This means that compared to the usual SSL or TLS, we don't encapsulate SMTP in TLS, but we encapsulate TLS in SMTP. So that any relay can talk to any other relay, and once they have connected, they decide whether yes or no, they will communicate in TLS. This one was normalized also in 1999. Of course, it has been updated many times, and now it's very widely used. Almost all SMTP transactions are encrypted nowadays. The other point also is end-user authentication, meaning nowadays I cannot send an email saying that I am the president of the world anymore, because before sending an email in most of the relays, not all of them, but most, I must authenticate first before, as an end user, I send the email. So this SMTP just allows to pass credentials to adopt a per user policy. And this has big advantages because first of them, it allows to have a control on the email address I use, but it also can avoid me to send spam, because if I send too many emails or an email to many recipients or too many emails that are detected as spam or virus, then I can be cut by my provider. My rights should be cut, and then I cannot send an email anymore. So that was a very good improvement. And the user authentication can also, of course, be performed with a mutual TLS. So back to the previous slide, so that you don't use a password to authenticate yourself, but you use a certificate, which is very common in many applications, of course. And regarding the phishing, meaning the use of a domain, you saw that what we saw before regarding the authentication, for example, you can manage it at end user level, but anyone can have his own mail relay. Why not? It's not difficult to have a server. You just need an internet connection. You install postfix on it, and then it's okay. And you send whatever you want on it. So this means that MTR relay need to trust a user, but how can an MTR relay trust another MTR relay? Meaning, if you send me an email stating that your domain is presidentoftheworld.org, how can I trust you? And there are some mechanisms, but they are far more recent than the previous ones. We are now in the early 2000s. The first one is a Sender Policy Framework, SPF. This one allows, it's a DNS entry on a domain, and it allows a domain to decide or to show what IPs are allowed to send on his behalf. That idea is rather good, but it had in the beginning two major inconvenients. The first one is that it applied on the mail from command and not on the header. This means that if I send an email, if I come back to there, SPF applies to that line, but on the from header, it has no effect. So this means, okay, the return path is whatever I want, whatever legitimate address, but the from header is still a fake one. And so the one that displays on the email is still the fake one. So that I can still deceive the receiver of the mail. So here back. So this one was later on completed by another one that is domain key identified mails. And here we'll talk about cryptography, because once again we'll see that there is no way we can have security without cryptography. And this one proposes a header with a cryptographic signature inside the email. This means that when you send an email through a relay to another domain, the first domain will sign the email, and this signature will prove that you are allowed to send on the behalf of the domain. And how does it work? The public key is published on the DNS of the sender's domain, so that when you receive the mail, you can check the public key through a DNS query, and you can check the signature in the header. And the signature is based on the hash of some headers, of course, the subject, the from header, so that it cannot be spoofed on the way, and on the body or part of the body, depending on the implementation. And that one, DKIM, is the first real security, anti-phishing security, and the first efficient anti-phishing security. The point is that DKIM was hardly implemented. Now it starts being really adopted, because Gmail said 1 year ago that it was to oblige everyone to use to sign its email with DKIM, but they're still saying, okay, we'll make it mandatory, but it's not really yet mandatory. And so DKIM is completed by DMARC, domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. And this one is a way to publish the policy you want to be adopted on your domain, because if one say, okay, my email is signed with DKIM, but how can I state that every mail from my domain has to be signed with DKIM, has to comply with FPF policy? Then this is published in the DNS, in the TXT entry. It's a DMARC entry, and it defines a per domain policy in regard with SPF and DKIM, so that you can say, okay, I publish here on the DNS that my domain is secure, and that you should not accept the mail if it does not comply either with DKIM or with SPF or with both. And it also has a big advantage. It's that it proposes a mechanism for reporting the activity of the domain to the postmaster, meaning that if someone is spoofing my domain, there is in the DMARC country reporting address, and that reporting address will get a report, and they'll say, okay, that evil guy is spoofing my domain. I should strengthen my security on my policy. So these three mechanisms rely on the DNS, and that's fine, but DNS in itself is rather insecure. So they are really secure if DNSSEC is implemented for the domain, of course. I say that, and it's very important, because that's a pity. DNSSEC is still rather poorly adopted nowadays. And at Worldline, we are not very good at that. So you see the RFC, you see the last RFC is not even 10 years old, is DMARC. So these are rather new if you compare this to the history of the internet. And for the future, because now I said, okay, I can show that I am the owner of the email and that I have the domain and that I can set on behalf of the domain. But what, for instance, if I buy a domain, I want to spoof worldline.com, and okay, I've bought a domain that is worldline.com. Any user looking rather fast will not see the difference between the M and the N, and I will send phishing that just the phishing, the from header will be worldline.com. I will not take care and I will fall. I will click, and that will be evil. So there is another mechanism that is called BIMI, brand indicator for message identification, that allows you to put a logo on the left of the email. You'll say me, okay, but maybe anyone can put a logo. No, that's not so easy, because in order for this logo to be displayed, you need it to be certificated with just a X509 certificate, but very few certification authorities are allowed to deliver such certificate, and these certification authorities have to do very strict tests and manual tests. It's not Let's on Trust that will allow you to have a BIMI logo. At Worldline, for this, we are good at least. We are implemented BIMI for our customers, SFR on La Poste. So SFR Webmail and La Poste.net Webmail implement BIMI, and we are really early adopters, because you can see that the RFC is still in a draft test since 4 years. So RFC is very long to be published, and that's probably the very best way to protect a brand against phishing. And this relies mainly on the seriousness of the certification authority. If ever a certification authority decides to do low-cost certificate, or decide to automate the process too much, or if ever a webmail provider decides that they finally don't check for the certificate for whatever reason, then everything falls down. And so a certificate, a BIMI certificate is rather expensive. I'd say rather it's more expensive than a server TLS certificate, but something like 150 euros. It's not the end of the world for a company, but at least it allows to have a serious check, on the human check on the certificate and on the logo, because it's the logo that is certificated. So the use of that is to summarize, is to avoid the use of a typo-squatted domain, as I said, for example, worldline.com. If I come with my domain worldline.com and want to have my logo to be certificated, of course, I need to show what is my company and so on. And if the logo is like Worldline logo, then the certification authority should say, no pass. You are using a logo that you don't own. So if I do a brief history, so I based on the RFC. So the RFC generally is not the date of the appearance of a technology, because before the RFC is published, it has been drafted and it has been conceived and so on. So it's generally later, but roughly I consider that it's rather good to take it as a date of adoption, or more or less adoption. So you can see that the first emails are in 1977. Remember, the first spam was 1 year later, so it didn't take long. In 1982, the RFC 821 and 22 makes it resemble the email we know nowadays, except that they had no MIME attachment, so it was just plain text. When plain text was just not even HTML. You cannot put it bold or whatever font police you want, because it's just plain text. But in 1996, then with MIME, you had HTML part in your emails. It was much more sexy and much more easy also to do something looking like phishing or spam. And then only in 1999 came the first mechanism to start securing the email. So it's 22 years, or maybe 17 years if you consider the RFC 821, 70 years after the normalization of the email format. So the internet message format is just an extension of the previous, but you can see that the first mechanism for securing against the phishing and against the domain spoofing was in 2006. It was not so old, and in 2006 the adoption rate of SPF was still rather poor. In fact, very poor, because SPF is not yet fully adopted. I don't know. So I forgot to add DMARC here in 2015, but you can see that the RFC for BIMI was 2020. It's not yet formalized. So we have implemented it already at Worldline. I hope it was not too early, but hopefully, I think that the current draft is the last draft, so it should not change a lot. I don't think we'll have to rework it at a whole. But there are some interesting facts about BIMI and about its implementation. So to say that the word of email is a jingle, I told you that BIMI relies on the certificate. It also relies, of course, on DMARC, meaning that if there is no strong DMARC policy, or if the email doesn't comply with DMARC, the BIMI logo won't be displayed. But DMARC relies either on SPF or on DKIM. If I come back. Here it is with SPF and or DKIM. And so many people hosted them domain at Microsoft Office 365, and then for SPF they put the very wide entry, meaning all the outgoing IPs of Office 365. This means that in regards with this domain, SPF is an issue, because plenty domains can go out through plenty IPs, and they will be DMARC authenticated because of that. And regularly, more than regularly, every day, every minute, and maybe every second, a domain or a mailbox is hacked on Office 365, and some people can use it to spoof the domain of other customers of Office 365. And so, thanks to that, they got a spoofed mail with an authenticated with DMARC authentication that is passed. And thanks to that, they could display a BIMI logo. And some 6 months or a year ago, we saw some UPS phishing mail that had a BIMI logo because of that, because they was related through Office 365 hacked account. So because of that, it has been decided that finally for BIMI it was not enough to have a DMARC pass policy, but it was required to have a DKIM authentication. And maybe someone will spoof a DKIM, because DKIM, once again, DKIM relies on cryptography, on asymmetric cryptography. The public key, I told you, is in the DNS. The private key is on the mail relay. When you send a mail outside, your mail relay will add the header with the signature. So the mail relay has the private key. And many mail relays are mutualized. Mainly, for instance, the one of the routers. When you want to send a commercial email, generally you want the email to have the from header of your company, the domain of your company, and so you have to give a private key to the company that sends your email. We don't know if the company is trustful or not, and that's the point. This means that they came in some condition. If the key is lost, the key is not secured anymore. So you can resiliate a key on the key. You just remove it from your DNS. But if your DNS TTL is rather long, sometimes it's 24 hours or even more, then it means that it will take 24 hours before your key is revoked. So I made around the question, around the presentation. So remains 10 minutes. If you have any question,